Hello everyone, this is Ma'am Liz again. Today I will be discussing you the climate change impacts on forest, ecosystem, and agriculture and food supply. So this will be just a brief discussion since these are all basic information regarding the impacts of climate change on different sectors. Okay, so let's start with its impacts on forest. So how does it affect the growth and productivity of forest? The growth and productivity of forest is directly and indirectly affected by climate change, no, through changes in the temperature, rainfall, weather, and other factors. And also, of course, elevated levels of carbon dioxide also have an effect on plant growth. So when you say elevated levels, it just means high levels of carbon dioxide. Okay. So let's discuss the three examples of the impacts of climate change on forest growth and productivity. So there are many more aspects related to the climate change which affects forest growth and productivity, but we will be focusing on these three. So first, the increases in temperature. Okay, warming temperatures generally increase the length of the growing season. So, the more siya magkainit, the more nga mutaas ang length of the growing season. And how does it affect forest growth and productivity? So, kung taas ang growing season, it just basically means nga dugay ang harvest. So, it affects forest productivity. And if dugay ang harvest, especially in plantations, forest plantations, if dugay ang harvest, so domino effect siya, makaapekto po siya sa livelihood sa mga forest-dependent community. Okay? Habitats of some types of trees are likely to move north or to higher altitudes. So, na-mention na siya before katong climate impacts on tropical forest. Na some species, flora and fauna, pag muinit na gani, pag musobra na kainit ang temperature, they tend to move to higher altitudes. So, sa may naa sa higher altitudes. Sa higher altitudes, mas cooler ang temperature. So, they tend to move to higher altitudes para maiwasan nila ang high temperature. Other species will be at risk locally or regionally if conditions in their current geographic ranges are no longer suitable. So, of course, they are at risk. Both flora and fauna. If dili na suitable ang geographic conditions sa ilahang natural habitat, of course, they will be at risk. So, for example daw, species that currently exist only on mountaintops in some regions may die out as the climate warms since they cannot shift to a higher altitude. So, of course, tungod kay naa sila sa mountaintops, they cannot move to a higher altitude, no? Kay na naman sila sa pinakataas. So, ang tendency ana is mamatay sila. Okay, next, changes in precipitation. So, climate change will likely increase the risk of drought in some areas and the risk of extreme precipitation and flooding in others. So, sa mga wala nakabalo, kanang precipitation nga word, this is just a collective term, no? For example, sa rain, snow, drizzle, storm, and the likes. So, they are all called precipitation. So, kung maingon tag precipitation, dili lang rain ang gipasabot ani. Okay, so you have to remember that dili lang ni siya rain. It also includes snow, drizzle, hails, and others. So of course, since climate change, it will increase the risk of drought, no? Sa manang drought, kanang sobraan kainit in some areas, and then in other areas, extreme pod nga precipitation or extreme rainfall, extreme snowstorms, so mga inana. Although many trees are resilient to some degree of drought, increases in temperature could make future droughts more damaging than those experienced in the past. So although daw na ay mga trees nga resilient sa drought, but because kanunay nga nagainit, nagadugang ang kainit sa ato ang temperature sa Earth. So, basin moabot ang panahon, no, nga ang mga future droughts dili na kaya i-surpass sa mga trees nato. And then, of course, drought increases wildfire risk since dry trees and shrubs provide fuel to fires. And then, drought also reduces trees' ability to produce sap, which protects them from destructive insects. So, always remember nga ang climate change, ang effects ana niya, dili lang siya moigo, no, sa certain species or sa certain group of wildlife. It is a domino effect. So, kung mo-effect siya sa trees, mo-effect po siya sa animals. And then, mo-effect po siya eventually to us, humans. Okay, next, the increase in carbon dioxide. So, of course, carbon dioxide is required for photosynthesis. It is one of the main component para maka-photosynthesize ang plants. So, the process by which green plants use sunlight to grow. So, given sufficient water and nutrients, increases in atmospheric carbon dioxide may enable trees to be more productive, which may change the distribution of tree species. Now, kung daghan na high levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it may be beneficial, no, for the trees or for the plants, given nga naa sila'y sufficient or enough nga water and nutrients. So, it may enable trees or plants to be more productive. However, nagyapon siya'y negative impact because it may change, no, the distribution of tree species. So, growth will be highest in nutrient-rich soils with no water limitation and will decrease with decreasing fertility and water supply. So, ang growth sa ato ang trees and plants will be highest, of course, dito sa mga nutrient-rich soils and kadtong mga abunda og tubig or no water limitation. But what if ang trees is naa siya sa area na dili nutrient-rich ang soil and then poor pagyud og water supply? So, of course, ang ang growth sa trees will be decrease. So, muna siya effect sa climate change on the forest growth and productivity. Okay, dito sa forest disturbances. So, from the word itself, no, disturbance, so meaning negative gid siya. So, these are events that cause change in the structure and composition of a forest ecosystem beyond the growth and death of individual organisms. So, of course, this includes insect outbreaks, invasive species, wildfires, flooding, and storms. All the catastrophes nga pwede moabot sa ato ang forest. So, these are called forest disturbances. So, these disturbances can reduce forest productivity. So, of course, makareduce gid siya og forest productivity, no? For example, ang isa ka forest is niagi siya og wildfire. So, mga sunog ang mga trees. So, ma-reduce na ang forest productivity. And it can also change the distribution of tree species. So, in some cases, it results to these three. So, kaning tulo. Una, forest can recover from a disturbance, okay? Ang forest or ang plants or trees, na nature na sa ilaha nga mo adapt, no, to their environment. And if naay disturbance, some trees are resilient. Some trees dili sila maapektuhan kaayo. So they can recover, no, from a disturbance. That is a good thing pag maka-recover from a disturbance. But sometimes, existing species may shift their range or die out. So, pasabot anang mag-shift og range, no? Mostly in faunas or katong atong mga animals. So, they may shift their range or mobalhin sila into other habitat. Like, for example, kaning a certain forest is niagi og wildfire or niagi og storm. And if they feel that they cannot adapt, so mubalhin na sila og habitat. And it is a domino effect. No, ang pagbalhin nila will affect, of course, the trees nga naa ato nga area, and it will also affect the people that are dependent on those wildlife. Or in a worst case scenario, they may die out. Okay, so mga matay sila. So the new species of vegetation that colonize the area create a new type of forest. So sometimes tungod kay nangamatay man ang trees or ang animals, so moagi na siya og ecological succession. So later on in your forest ecology na subject, you will tackle that topic kanang ecological succession, no? So kung nangamatay na ang trees, nangamatay na ang animals nga kadtong mga previous nga naa dira nga area, so new type of species or new type of animals ang mo puyo or mo puli ana nga area. So it will be a new type of forest na. So siguro na ay mga trees nga dili sila sa pagkakaroon, for example, kuan sila kanang mossy forest sila karon, maybe before, no, sa una pa nga panahon, dili siguro na siya mossy forest. But because of forest disturbances, nahimo siya mossy forest. So that's just the concept of it. So disturbances can interact with one another or with changes in temperature and precipitation to increase risk to forests. So for example, drought can weaken trees and make a forest more susceptible to wildfire or insect outbreaks. Similarly, wildfire can make a forest more vulnerable to pests. So like I said, domino effect ni siya. So kanang mga forest disturbances, sometimes a forest disturbance is a result from another forest disturbance. So kani pares ani ang example, no? Because of drought or kainit, kauga sa yuta, it may weaken the trees and make it more susceptible or vulnerable to wildfire or insect outbreaks. So, forest disturbances, sometimes it can interact with one another. So, impacts of disturbances. Excuse me. Insect outbreaks. So, insect outbreaks often defoliate, weaken, and kill trees. So, of course, insects, kauno na nila ang mga trees, no? Ang leaves sa trees, so it may result to defoliation or mga wala ang leaves sa trees, and it may weaken and eventually kill it. And then a lack of natural control such as predators or pathogens as well as inadequate defenses in trees can allow insects to spread. And then rising temperatures may enable some insect species to develop faster, alter their seasonal life cycles, and expand their ranges northward. So rising temperatures, sometimes sa kainit sa panahon, it may enable or it may affect the phenology of some insect species. So, ang uban, mas paspas sila mo develop. And then, mas paspas sila mo develop, mas dali mahuman ilang life cycle, tapos mas maka-adapt sila in higher temperatures. So, invasive plant species can displace important native vegetation because the invasive species often lack natural predators. So, kana mga invasive species, it can negatively alter, no, its new environment. So, why? So, kasagaran, invasive species, pag makaturok sila, no, for example, an invasive tree species, so pag makaturok sila ana nga area, usahay na ana sila'y chemical nga igawas nga mamatay itong mga native nga trees. So pag mamatay na mga native na trees, sila na ang dominant, no, dito na area. And pag mapulihan siya, pag mapulihan ang katong native na trees o invasive na species, so it will result to many other scenarios. No, it will affect the wildlife living in that certain area tungod kay basin di ay pagkaon nila tong mga native nga species nga naa didto, and since nangawala na, so wala na sila kakuhaan og pagkaon nila, so it will be a domino effect. And then wildfires, climate change has projected to increase the extent, intensity, and frequency of wildfires in certain areas of the country. So warmer spring and summer temperatures coupled with decreases in water availability, dry out woody materials in forests can increase the risk of wildfire or forest fire. And then fires can also contribute to climate change since they can cause rapid, large releases of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So wildfires, no, pag sobraan na kainit, pag nisaka na ang temperature sa earth, it may cause wildfires or forest fires. And then pag masunog pa gyud ang forest, it can result or it can add up to the carbon dioxide that is present in the atmosphere, because we all know nga tong forest, ang atong trees, kuan na sila mo sequester na sila og carbon. So pasabot ano mo sequester, meaning mo absorb na sila og carbon. And if masunog ang atong forest, and if masunog ang trees, large releases of carbon dioxide, no, will be released to the atmosphere. And we all know what will happen kung daghan na kaayo og carbon dioxide sa ato ang atmosphere. It will add up to the greenhouse gases na maoy hinungdan sa climate change. Okay? And then lastly, last forest disturbance is the storms. So hurricanes, ice storms, and windstorms can cause damage to forests. Of course, that's basic information. The amount of carbon released by these trees as they decay is roughly equivalent to the net amount of carbon sequestered by all U.S. forests in a single year. So, effect po siya sa forest kung naay storms. So, that's just basic information. Okay, let's move on to the climate change impacts on the ecosystem. So, these are the terms. Di na lang nako na siya i-discuss, no? So, diretso sa how does climate change affect the ecosystem? Okay? Warming of the Earth's atmosphere may force species to migrate to higher elevations where temperatures are more conducive to their survival. So I've said this before, some species tend to move to higher elevations or tend to move north where temperatures are more conducive or are more suitable, no, for their survival. So as sea level rises, so in terms of sea level, saltwater intrusion into a freshwater system may force some case species to relocate or die, thus removing predator or prey that are critical in the existing food chain. So isa pod ni siya ka-result sa climate change, no, ma-disrupt ang atoang food chain. Okay. So projected warming could greatly increase the rate of species extinctions, especially in sensitive regions. Now, kung dili maka-adapt ang certain trees or certain wildlife, like I said, it may result to them dying out. So, kung mamatay sila, there is a big possibility of species extinction. Diba? Grabe ka hadlok, no, ang effect sa climate change. Climate change can overwhelm the capacity of ecosystems to mitigate extreme events and disturbance such as wildlife, floods, and droughts. So changes in the timing of the seasonal life cycle events. So for many species, the climate where they live or spend part of the year influences key stages of their annual life cycle, such as migration and reproduction. So of course, ang climate no sa isa ka lugar, dako na siya og effect sa life cycle sa isa ka species. And if that certain climate magbinuang or madaot because of climate change, it has a big impact to the annual life cycle of a species, such as migration, no? Their migration and reproduction schedule. And then species differ in their ability to adjust. Because of this, asynchronies may develop, increasing species and ecosystem vulnerability. So these asynchronies can include mismatches in the timing of migration, breeding, pest avoidance, and food availability. Growth and survival are reduced when migrants arrive at a location before or after food sources are present. So since na-affect naman ang ilahang life cycle events, such as migration o reproduction, now if ang isa ka species, let's say for example birds, no, naman dyan mga birds nga mag-migrate, part na gid ng migration sa ilahang life cycle. Now if mag-migrate sila, moabot sila sa kadtong nga lugar nga usually nila ginaadtuan because mas daghan dito og food supply, and then pag abot nila dito is wala na di ay, hurot na, or wala pa di ay ang food. So, unsay mahitabo sa ilaha? They may die, no, of hunger and also of tiredness. Okay, for example, ang birds, lagyo kay na silang migratan. And then pag abot nila dito sa location, wala di ay food. So, imagine kung unsay mahitabo sa ilaha. Some of them, siguro, mobalik sa ilahang gigikanan. Some of them will fly out to different location, mangita og other source of food. But some of them will also die. So that's the effect of the changes in the climate system. And then another effect to the ecosystem is the range shifts. So as temperature increase in both land and water environments or aquatic environments, plants and animals have moved to higher elevations and latitudes. Okay? As rivers and streams warm, warm water fish are expanding into areas previously inhabited by cold water species. So naanay overlapping of territories. So this is an example, no? Ang katudang mga warm water fish, they may expand their area since they will be moving to higher altitudes or moving to higher elevations. They may overlap with cold water fishes or cold water species. Overlapping of territories. And it is not a good sign, no, para sa ato ang flora and fauna. As waters warm, cold water fish are losing their habitat, with projections of 47% habitat loss by 2080. So while this means a range expansion for some species, for others it means movement into less hospitable habitat, increased competition or range reduction, with some species having nowhere to go because they are already at the top of a mountain or at the northern limit of land suitable for their habitat. So while this means daw a range expansion for some species, so naiuban species modako ilang territory. But to some species, this has a negative impact, no, to them, kaning range shifts. Okay, they have no choice but to move to higher elevations, which means they have to adapt again. They have to adjust to a less hospitable habitat, to a less suitable habitat, and then increase nga competition, because if mag-overlapping ang territory, which means mudaghan ang species nga naa na nga area, which means daghan ang mag-compete sa pagkaon and sa nutrients. Or range reduction. And with some species, no having nowhere to go. So like I said, katong mga species nga naa na on top of a mountain or at the northern limit of land, it will not be suitable for their habitat. And then these factors lead to local extinctions of both plants and animals in some areas. And then range shifts disturb the current state of the ecosystem and can limit opportunities for fishing and hunting. So let's continue to the next video.